My dad labeled my career dirty and erased me from the family fortune. Then came begging for $120,000 after my brother destroyed the family business. Can you imagine a world where the people who should love you most betray you? A world where your own father calls your hard-earned career filthy, cuts you out of the family fortune, only to crawl back later, begging for $120,000 because your golden boy brother completely tanked the family business? What the hell do you do when your entire family expects you to keep saving them, even after they've left you for dead? You might look at my life now and think, Henry's got it all. I run a successful pet care chain here in New York. I'm 30, financially stable, I own my home, my car, and I work from a bright, sunny office that I absolutely love. It seems like the perfect picture, right? A loving, supportive family behind me. But there is no family. Not anymore. Not the one I used to have. Anyway, I walked away from them exactly a year ago, standing in the middle of a massive family gathering, the words just tumbling out. I don't belong here anymore. It wasn't an easy decision, not by a long shot. But when you're teetering on the edge of quiet despair and profound disappointment, you have to choose. Keep going down the same destructive path, or finally break free. I'm telling you this story not to play the blame game, or to defend myself, but as a reminder to myself, and maybe to you, that to truly live, you have to be willing to lose everything you thought was impossible to let go of. And that's why on Easter Sunday last year, I left my family, and I haven't regretted it since. That day, after what felt like an endless string of frigid spring rains, the sun finally decided to shine. I drove out of Manhattan early, past folks heading to church, feeling a quiet, bittersweet hope that my family, our family, could still find a way back to being together. Being on time, for me, always meant being 15 minutes early, and that day was no different. When I arrived at the house, it was buzzing with laughter and chatter, more crowded than any holiday before, packed with relatives from everywhere. Faces I recognized, but names I couldn't quite place. My mom had casually mentioned that Dad had a big announcement planned, but I didn't push for details. I had just brought her favorite chocolate mousse cake from a little Brooklyn bakery, placing it carefully on the kitchen counter. For years, these small offerings, a bottle of good red wine, gourmet pastries, her favorite flowers, were my way of trying to bridge the ever-widening distance between us. A hopeful attempt to keep a small piece of the sun I was still trying to be alive. 20 minutes later, the celebration was in full swing. Glasses clinking, the smell of grilled meat and baked potatoes filling the air, the usual drone of conversations about real estate, stock prices, and kids' schools. I found myself at a corner of the table, quietly eating, just listening. I didn't join in. I didn't feel the need to. Then, about half an hour after everyone had settled, my dad stood up. He hoisted his wine glass, and that booming voice, the one he reserved only for his most important pronouncements, cut through the noise. Everyone, please quiet down. We have something significant to share. The room fell silent instantly, every eye on him. My heart, it just skipped a beat. Our family has come to a decision, he announced, his gaze sweeping across the room. Starting today, all the assets, the company, the shares, the real estate, will be handed over to Matteo. The silence that followed was deafening, a thick, suffocating blanket. And then, almost on cue, like they'd been rehearsing for this moment, the applause erupted. Loud, hurried, enthusiastic. My mom spoke next, her eyes shining with a strange, almost manic joy, as if this was her life's ultimate achievement. Matteo's been working at the family company for 5 years now, she beamed, and he'll be the one to carry on the legacy, to take it to the next level. I just sat there, staring at my water glass. I felt the cold chill of the glass against my fingertips, but it did nothing to numb the ache in my chest. Waves of applause crashed against my chair like physical blows. No one had asked my opinion. No one even looked at me. No one thought to ask, "What about Henry?" I was right there, but utterly invisible. Present, yet they'd decided I was out of the story. I mean, sure, I knew they favored Mateo, but this? My younger brother, Mateo, he's 2 years younger. We weren't glued at the hip as kids, but we never fought. My childhood, I remember it being marked by a fierce sense of justice. Our parents always seemed to treat us equally. Everything was split down the middle. 2 birthday cakes, 2 identical candy bags, 2 nearly identical bikes, just different colors. And when we got into trouble, the punishment was always the same. No one ever got off easier. I remember one time, after we scribbled all over the wall, Mom made us both kneel and scrub every single pencil mark. No partiality. I truly believed my family was fair, until I turned 18. I was sitting in the living room on an early September evening. Dad heard I wanted to study veterinary medicine. A vet. I'd pored over school brochures, picked one, even secured a partial scholarship. I just needed some financial assistance to get started. I thought maybe he'd ask about my ambitions, offer some advice, or just nod his encouragement. Instead, he sat there, arms crossed, his gaze freezing me in place, like I'd just said something utterly shameful. "I'm not putting a single dime into that career," he declared, his voice flat. "If that's what you want, you're on your own." In that one sentence, simple yet devastatingly final, all my hopes for what family truly meant shattered. I didn't get it then. I couldn't comprehend how a career choice could make me feel like a traitor. It took years to understand. My choices simply didn't align with their agenda. After that, I was no longer the family's pride. That role, that mantle, slowly but surely, shifted to Mateo. Everything changed after that conversation. A quiet, progressive detachment, not harsh words or outright disapproval, but a slow fade. Over time, I became silent. Maybe that was the price I paid for deviating from their carefully laid plans. Even as we drifted apart, I never abandoned them when they truly needed me. I still sent Mom Mother's Day roses. When Dad's AC broke down in the summer, I was there to help. When the company struggled, I kept showing up. I never kept score. So maybe that's why the betrayal hit so hard. It came from the one person I believed would never treat me like an outsider. My own father. It was about a year before that Easter dinner. He called late one night, his voice low, wavering, like he'd been wrestling with himself before dialing. I'll never forget what he said. The company, he told me, was in crisis. A major contract had fallen through at the last minute, and they needed $80,000 immediately to prevent total collapse. I tentatively suggested writing up a formal statement or documenting my firm contributions. But he shut that down instantly. He soothed me with one simple sentence. "When your mother and I are gone, you'll still have a share of the company. This is family business, after all." At that moment, I asked for nothing else. The next morning, I wired $80,000 to the company account. My father's quiet words, after a long pause on the phone, were the only contract I had. "When your mother and I are gone, you'll still have a share of the company. This is family business." And I just nodded. He stressed family, and like a fool, I believed him. But now I know I should have demanded a signed agreement. Maybe I should have known better. Some people only value family when they need something from you. So, at Easter last year, when my father announced Mateo would inherit absolutely everything, I didn't stay quiet like I had so many times before. My voice, clear and firm, cut through the celebratory din. "What about me?" The question hung in the air, wine glasses hovering mid-clink. The room plunged into an awkward, suffocating silence. Some people actually turned to stare at me, as if just realizing I'd been there all along. Whispers started rippling through the room. "That's right. What about Henry? He's Mateo's older brother." As the tension thickened like a heavy fog, my mother stepped in, her voice trying to sound gentle, trying to make something utterly cruel seem acceptable. "Henry, darling, you already have a career, a house, a car." "But Mateo," she pleaded, "he has nothing." When she finished, I locked eyes with her. I spoke softly, but each syllable felt like a stone dropping. "That career? I built it with my own hands. I left home at 18 and figured everything out on my own. I didn't take a single cent from you or Dad. I earned a scholarship, worked my way through school, saved every dollar. Meanwhile, you paid for all of Mateo's tuition and covered all his expenses. And now you just hand everything over to him like I never even existed? I'm your son, too. Before anyone could reply, Mateo, smug as ever, piped up. Mom's right. You shouldn't be competing with me. I spun around, pointing a finger directly at him. Shut your mouth. You don't even have the right to speak. Silence, absolute and chilling, descended upon the room once more. Then my dad slammed his hand on the table, a sound like a gunshot. His voice shrill, each word a painful slap. That's enough, Henry. Mateo followed the path we laid out. You didn't. If you hadn't chosen those filthy animals, this company would have been yours. I froze. Filthy animals? What the hell are you talking about? I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. That's an insult. Do you even realize that it was thanks to those so-called filthy animals that I made the $80,000 that saved your company? And if you look down on my job that much, pay me back right now. He shot to his feet, red-faced, eyes flashing. I'm not giving you a damn cent. I brought you into this world, raised you, fed you, educated you. Do you know how much I spent on you? And now you're out there cleaning up after dogs and cats? You're an embarrassment. The moment those words left his mouth, I was done. Utterly, completely done. I waited nearly 30 seconds, trying to steady my voice, before I spoke again. If that's how you feel, then we have nothing to do with each other from now on. Don't come looking for me again. I turned to leave, but then stopped, needing to say one last thing, not to apologize, but to close the door definitively. Dad, I never asked to be born. So please, don't throw your so-called sacrifices in my face to guilt me into following your path. And don't use them as leverage to force me into carrying the weight of this family anymore. After that, I walked out, head held high, and I never looked back. That night, I was back in my own apartment before 9. I went straight to the bathroom, turning the water on full blast. I needed to wash away the hatred, the injustice, the searing hurt from that evening. Nearly 20 minutes passed before I emerged, feeling lighter, my mind less burdened, but that quiet, hollow emptiness lingered. I brewed myself a steaming cup of black coffee, needing to stay awake, needing to process. As I sat by the window, the city lights a distant hum, my mind drifted back to the day I turned 18. I had left home with just an old suitcase, a few clothes, and the meager savings I'd scraped together from part-time jobs. Even then, I struggled just to cover living expenses. My parents, in all those years, never once asked if I was okay. My first 2 years after graduating, I lived in a tiny studio, pinching every penny to pay off my student loans. Then, in my 3rd year, something completely unexpected happened. It was a peaceful Sunday afternoon. I had no plans, no shifts. I had this funny idea. Why not make a pet care video? So I did. I propped my phone up on books and shoeboxes, and I just talked like I was talking to a friend. When I finished, I uploaded it to Facebook and YouTube. I did it purely for fun, no expectations. If someone found it, great. If not, no big deal. Within 2 days, it went viral. I mean viral. Within 48 hours, it had nearly 3 million views across platforms. I was stunned. I kept refreshing the page, convinced it was a glitch. But then the comments and messages started pouring in, and I realized people genuinely needed what I had to say. So I made more videos. My initial goal was just to share knowledge. Then my first payment came in from ads and sponsorships, $2,000. A month later, I stared at that number on my screen for a long, long time. Surprised, anxious, wondering if I was dreaming. But the number kept growing. 9 months later, I had 1 million YouTube subscribers. Within a year, over 2 million followers across all my platforms. Then the pet care brands started reaching out. They wanted to collaborate, sponsor videos, send me products to review. I realized this wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was something more. Finally, with the incredible support of my online community, I opened my first pet care store. I called it Whisker and Paw because I wanted to share kindness and love, things my own family had never truly given me as a child. That first location was more successful than I could have imagined. Maybe it was the community that had backed me since my earliest videos, or maybe people just sensed my sincerity in treating every customer, two-legged and four-legged alike, with genuine care. After just a few months, I had to hire more staff, extend hours, and start looking for a second location. The second branch opened a year later. For years after that, Whisker and Paw had 7 outlets across the city's boroughs, with over 30 full-time and part-time staff. Some of them have been with me since the very beginning. A few joined recently, but every single one of them is part of my new, handmade family. I never gloated about my success, especially not to my biological family or relatives. That lesson came from an industry mentor, someone who gave me advice when I was nobody. He told me something I still remember vividly. Never flaunt your success, not even to your parents. Back then, I didn't understand. Why wouldn't you tell your family? Shouldn't they be the first to know about your achievements? But as I got older, I understood. Everyone, truly everyone, harbors some envy, some more than others. Sharing your achievements doesn't just garner admiration. It opens your wallet. They start thinking you're fair game to ask for money, business ideas, or help, since we're family. And when you decline, admiration curdles into resentment, bitter, festering resentment. So I kept quiet. I'd still go home for holidays, bringing pastries, gifts, a nice bottle of wine, a thoughtful present for Mom. But I never mentioned money, staff numbers, or new projects. To them, I was still Henry the pet sitter. And honestly, I preferred it that way. For about 6 months after that Easter dinner, I didn't text, didn't call, didn't go home. My parents, Charles and Margaret Walker, were silent too. 0 check-in texts, no unexpected calls. It felt like my disappearance was exactly what they wanted. And I wasn't sad. In those early days, waking up without checking for Mom's message felt like a physical weight had been lifted. Every night, I could sit alone in my quiet apartment, drink my late-night coffee, and work without being pulled back into that vague sense of family responsibility. For the first time in years, I could finally name the feeling, freedom. Then, 6 months ago, my phone rang. I was pouring a second cup of coffee on a Saturday morning. It was Dad. His name flashed on the screen, and I froze in the kitchen, holding the half-full mug. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but I didn't press it. For a brief moment, I considered the possibility that they'd changed. Maybe, just maybe, this was an apology. I don't know why I even let myself believe that. Perhaps a tiny, stubborn part of me still hoped they'd reflected on everything after that night. A few rings later, I answered. Henry, the company's in serious trouble. His voice was immediate, no small talk, no hesitation. Mateo signed the wrong contract. Now we're looking at $120,000 in damages. Can you help us? For the family's reputation? For the Walker name? Without even thinking, the words just flew out. $80,000 was more than enough, Dad. If you want my help, start by paying that back. The other end went silent. I pictured his face, furious or disappointed, but I didn't care. I spoke again before he could respond. And if the only thing you're trying to save is the family name, let me remind you that name never once stood up for me. I hung up, leaving them to figure out their $120,000 mess. After rejecting my father on the phone, I figured they'd finally leave me alone. I was wrong. The very next morning, my doorbell rang. Loudly, rapidly, insistently, just past 7 a.m. No courtesy, no hesitation. Pushy, demanding, like someone was trying to force their way in. I hesitated, then opened the door. There stood Mateo and my parents. I hadn't invited them. I immediately blocked the entrance, standing squarely in the threshold, a clear sign. This is no longer our shared space. I knew exactly why they were there, so I said it clearly but calmly. If you're here for $20,000. Turn around. I'm not helping. My words resonated with an unnerving clarity down the quiet hallway, despite my low voice. When I finished, my mom visibly recoiled. Her eyes were crimson, not from tears, but from stress or maybe disappointment or even rage. With nowhere else to go, she spoke next, her voice attempting gentleness but tight with desperation. Henry, you have a whole chain of pet care stores. $120,000 isn't that much to you. I'm begging you. If you don't help, the company will collapse. Our family will lose everything. Mateo took a hesitant half-step forward. He avoided my eyes. I'd never heard his voice so quiet. Henry, please, just this once. I know I messed up. I know I ruined everything. I remained silent. I let them speak. I didn't interrupt. My head didn't tremble. I just stared at them, my hand grasping the doorframe, feeling like my very boundaries would crumble if I let go. After a long, agonizing pause, I replied slowly, clearly, "Leave before I call the police." My father's face hardened instantly. My mother opened her mouth to say more, but I stopped her. I repeated it louder to avoid any confusion. I have nothing to do with any of you anymore. You all have to live with the consequences of your choices, your favoritism, your silence. Mateo, too. If the company collapses, that's not a tragedy. It's a consequence, and I'm not responsible for saving anyone. I closed the door, firm, final. When they were gone, I returned to my cold coffee, but my mind was already racing in another direction. A question, a chilling whisper, stopped me mid-sip. How did they know I have 7 stores? I'd never told them, never mentioned it. I always kept my distance. Even at the rare family meetings before everything fell apart, I never discussed my business size or earnings. They didn't follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram. Then it hit me. YouTube. My videos. That was the one thing I couldn't hide. I still posted gentle, meaningful clips about my profession and my love for animals. Someone they knew must have sent them a link, or maybe they found it themselves. A shiver ran down my spine, not because I feared discovery, but because I knew exactly what they became when they sensed an opportunity to exploit. I acted immediately. I unlocked my phone, went to my message screen, and typed each phrase with deliberate precision. The sentences felt like hammering on a door. If you, Mom, or Mateo take any action that damages my reputation or business, I will sue. I'm serious. After sending, I prayed they wouldn't cross that border. Mateo, of course, ignored my clear warning. The very next day, he posted on Facebook, Reddit, and Instagram. I didn't even have to read it right away. Friends started sending it to me. I was getting questioned by my employees and even the media. I didn't need to read every word to understand his twisted narrative. His post claimed I had abandoned my family when they were on the brink of bankruptcy, that I'd ignored my parents' desperate pleas for aid. He wrote that I had expelled them like strangers from my own home. And, of course, he painted a picture of me mistreating my own flesh and blood. The plot was so twisted, so divorced from reality, I couldn't even tell what was real anymore. But people don't care about the truth. They just want an emotional story, a cold, affluent villain, a struggling, innocent family, and a terrible ending they can gossip about and condemn. I started losing clients that very morning. Numerous grooming appointments were canceled. Our company's social media pages were inundated with hate. I received hateful emails in my inbox, and I knew I was at risk of closing my businesses if I didn't act. That afternoon, I saw Brian, my old buddy and attorney. He'd helped me draft my first store lease all those years ago. I texted him one sentence, without even calling. I need to see you urgently. Brian squeezed me in between 2 meetings. His office was clean, quiet, and bathed in light from a wall of windows. As I explained everything, he sat behind his desk, his fingers intertwined, listening intently. I showed him printouts of the hateful comments, revenue figures illustrating the immediate impact, and a screenshot of Mateo's initial post, which I'd saved. When I finished, he looked up, folded his arms, and gave me an unreadable half-smile. Then Brian said, "You just hit the jackpot, Henry." I frowned. After a few seconds, I asked softly, "What do you mean?" Brian chuckled, leaning his head towards me. "I mean, you've got nothing to worry about. Everything Mateo's done, the post, the damage to your business, your personal and brand reputation, it all adds up to a solid civil case. And with the amount of evidence you've got, I can tell you right now, you're looking at a pretty big payout." I felt like a monumental weight had just been lifted off my shoulders. Brian continued calmly, "Mateo is going to be held accountable for what he's done, legally and financially, and if the court rules fairly, the compensation could exceed everything you've lost." I didn't say another word, just nodded. Then I opened my backpack, laid my meticulously prepared paperwork on his table, and told Brian, "Draft the case. I'm giving you full authority to handle this." Brian smiled, offering his hand, not for congratulations, but for a firm start. That afternoon, I signed the power of attorney. This time there was no warning text, no waiting for someone to change, no lingering emotion. I was going to sue, and for the first time in a very long time I felt utterly guilt-free. Weeks after I signed that power of attorney, Mateo's lawyer contacted Brian. They wanted to talk settlement. Not surprising. Like them, they only ever come to the table from the edge. They only pretend to resolve things gently after they've completely lost control. As expected, Brian called me into his office that Thursday afternoon. He casually showed me a tiny file and remarked, "Your family wants to propose a deal." I just looked at him, saying nothing. Brian opened the file, slid the top page toward me, and continued, "They want to sell the company. In exchange, they'd like to stay on as internal advisors." I scanned the lines from my seat. Nothing was technically wrong. Nothing was illogical. But I wanted no part of them anymore. I looked up, my voice calm and clear, not sour, but like someone completely done with needless concessions. "Tell them I'm not interested." Brian nodded slightly. He didn't ask why. I got up, grabbed my coat, and turned to him before leaving. "I'm not buying the company. I'm not hiring relatives as consultants." I hesitated, then added to finish it, "I'm not saving a family just to keep being treated like a walking wallet." The trial began 3 months after Mateo uploaded that fraudulent information. Even though the Manhattan District Courthouse was close to my apartment, I left early that morning. I needed a few quiet minutes in the car, just to breathe, regain my composure, and remind myself that I was doing the right thing for justice, not anger. I entered the courtroom and found Mateo already there. He sat next to his lawyer, looking apprehensive, clearly trying to maintain a calm facade. The arrogance and contemptuous attitude he'd given me when we argued at home were gone. He looked down more often than up that day. I looked forward. Brian was ready. He meticulously listed every single loss. Canceled contracts, store closures, income declines, employee compensation. Official stamps, receipts, and detailed paperwork supported every single claim. Nothing was exaggerated. Mateo's team tried to claim the message was personal, that they didn't expect the effects, and that people misinterpreted it. But no one in that courtroom believed that nearly 30,000 shares on social media were a simple misunderstanding. I kept my head down as the judge read the summary judgment. No need to look at Mateo. I listened calmly as the words came out. The defendant, Mateo Walker, is found liable for significant commercial damages and is ordered to compensate the plaintiff, Henry Walker, for direct losses totaling $248,000. Silence followed the verdict. I rose. I didn't look at Mateo. My parents weren't there, so I didn't look for their reaction. I simply left the courtroom, feeling like I'd just put a period at the end of a long, convoluted sentence that never needed to be written. I triumphed, not to teach anyone a lesson, but because I finally stopped letting things slide. After the litigation, I heard Mateo had to sell the company, once termed the family legacy, and his house to pay me the $248,000. I didn't ask for information, didn't investigate, didn't question his methods. I just didn't care anymore. I only needed to know that they ignored my warning. They chose that road, so they paid the price. The next 6 months were peaceful. But 3 days ago, early in the morning, it all came back in a painfully familiar way. It was Saturday. My doorbell rang at 7 a.m., the same time they'd asked for $120,000 before. The sky was dismal. After opening the door, I was astonished to see my mother. Her eyes were crimson, her face sunken, her hand grasping her bag strap like it was the only thing preventing her from breaking apart. At first, she was silent. Then, her voice tiny and husky, she managed, "Your father. He's in the hospital. It's serious this time. The treatment is estimated to cost close to $20,000. I know I was wrong, but please, just this once help me." I stood still. I wasn't angry then. My pity was completely absent. Just that familiar sense of emptiness in my chest, the one I'd experienced too many times when I realized I was caught in the same painful circle again. I lingered on her face for a moment. Then I whispered, more like an exhalation, "To me, my parents died the day both of you let Mateo destroy my career," and said nothing. "And I don't give money to the dead." She froze. No tears. No more pleading. Standing there with twitching lips, she seemed to want to say something, but couldn't. I didn't delay. I breathed deeply and said, "Clearly, ask your heir." I carefully closed the door, letting her know, unequivocally, that it wouldn't open again. Now, some of you may believe I'm nasty, cold-hearted, or unforgiving by now. If that's what you're thinking, please don't judge me right away. In fact, I did go to the hospital that afternoon after my mother left. I avoided my father's room. I didn't stand by the window like in the movies. I called the information desk with his name and requested an update. I went there to confirm her truthfulness, and indeed she had been right. My father was hospitalized, and his treatment did cost about $20,000. My documents were right there in front of me. I nearly took out my credit card. However, my mind immediately flashed back to Easter, 1 year earlier, to them lifting their glasses, publicly handing everything over to Mateo, and imploring me to understand. The next morning, still feeling a swirl of confusion from the day before, I called a couple of people. I checked that my parents still owned their house with real estate contacts. It wasn't mortgaged. It hadn't been transferred. It's worth about $400,000. They could easily sell that asset to pay for medical expenditures. I didn't pay the hospital expenses. Instead, I wrote my mother one message. "You still have the house. Sell it to pay for Dad's treatment." She didn't reply. Maybe she hesitated out of attachment to it, or because that house was always meant for Mateo. Maybe she just couldn't believe I wouldn't intervene again. No matter her excuse, I don't care. They decide whether to sell it or keep it. I've made my own decision. I won't return. After everything, I don't expect anything from my family. But I still believe in family. Now, I know family isn't always where you're born. Sometimes you choose to belong. I used to think they'd appreciate my effort and sacrifice if I just tried hard enough. However, some people only appreciate what you've given when you're done. I don't want this story to anger or sadden anyone. I'm posting it because I think someone out there is listening. Someone is in my shoes, expected to carry others, expected to understand. Only because they did better, they're expected to constantly be strong. I'll say one thing to you. You're not horrible for declining. You're not selfish for refusing repeated abuse. Sometimes kindness needs limits. Sometimes one-sided love must be let go if you're the only one clinging on. Before I finish, I want to ask you, the ones who've stayed and listened to the end, was I wrong to finally leave a family that had repeatedly treated me like a backup plan and abandoned me when I had nothing left to give? Was I overly harsh for refusing to help someone who had so completely rejected me, especially when I needed them most? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.